spoke about the political dispensation. So, Mr. Chagla, I ask you also about another time when there was emergency. It was one of the most controversial periods of our time. You battled it out in the Indian Express cases where you appeared for nearly 2 years with Fali Nariman, Ram Jethmalani, Guru Murthy. A lot of you appeared in those cases. You've also appeared in another case with Mr. Ashok Desai in the Supreme Court, where I read that there were policemen sitting in plain clothes in the Supreme Court, and they were noting down the names of the lawyers under the dark shadow of emergency of the lawyers who were appearing. Sir, what was emergency like, and what was your guiding force at those days when you were appearing in such matters?
I'm glad that you use the expression controversial period. Let me tell you, it was the darkest period in one's life. It was a time like no other time. You didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel at all. It was a dreadful, dreadful time. And the case that you speak of was not in the Supreme Court, it was the Bombay High Court, before Justice Jayanti Gandhi, where this was the back pay reclamation case, where our clients, Pidal Modi and Mrinal Gore and others, who by the time the matter, we had filed the petition before the emergency, and by the time it came up for hearing, all our clients were behind bars. So we carried on the matter without any clients, and there we were, arguing the matter. And the day one, we found that there were plainclothes people who were taking down all the names. And so at the luncheon time, we told Ashok Desai that, look, we have to do something about this. So we went to Justice Jayanti Gandhi's chambers and we told him that this is interfering with the way that we as lawyers can function. And Jayanti Gandhi was one of those large-hearted judges in the Bombay High Court, a man of great courage even during the emergency. And he came back to court at 2:45, that was the time in those days. And he said, if there is a single policeman present in this courtroom, I will take action against him. I want it vacated down. And a host of plainclothes chaps just walked out of the court. And then after that, we were able to argue the matter clearly. Of course, Indian Express was the other landmark matter at that time. And it was argued at different times in Madras and the company law board as it then was, and altogether very difficult. But apart from the matters in court, it was the atmosphere in even the law library, where you whispered rather than talk loudly. You didn't know whether somebody could overhear you and what might happen, what might not happen. But apart from what was happening in court or in the High Court library, it was my own home which was witness to those who were about to go underground, who perhaps were already underground. At that time, my father, he was, and for some curious reason, never detained. Our home became the meeting point for a whole host of people who would come with underground literature, which we would read and then return to them. There was a journalist from the Times of India, I remember, who told me that he was sending articles to various papers, Washington Post, New York Times, London Times. He said, what I do is I put it in a brown paper envelope, no names, nothing, and I go to the General Post Office and I post it. He said, is there any reason, any way that they can ever trace that? So I said, well, I think it will be extremely difficult. I can understand censorship of all incoming mail, but how they would ever do that for outgoing, I didn't really know. And lo and behold, this was Sundarajan. He came back and he told me, he said that I've just received a notice from the authorities to show cause why action should not be taken, and I've been called to answer. And of course, they confronted him with the articles and what he had written, and he confessed to it, and he was under detention. And would you believe it, that the newspaper that he worked for gave him notice that he was absent without cause, that he had not reported for work, and terminated his services. So those were the days of the emergency. And our home was a meeting point of all of these people. And in fact, even the birth of the Janata Party almost took place at Palanji Mansion, where we resided, where we had all the leaders of all the opposition members all coming there and talking about this. And of course, when Indira Gandhi said she would announce election in 1977, it was something which was unbelievable. It just shows that how in a dictatorship you can have a person who, surrounded by sycophants, is completely misguided and told that you are the most popular person in the world and you can never lose an election. But my greatest memory of the emergency years was going to Ahmedabad with my father, who delivered a lecture. It was for the Citizens for Democracy in Ahmedabad, which was still, in that sense, a free state. It was not a Congress government. And where he delivered a lecture which I believe is the greatest testament to freedom, to free thought that I have ever heard. And the culmination of that lecture, when he spoke, was something which made my hair stand on end. He said that this country is far too great to go under. He said, I am an old man. The saying is that the night is darkest before the dawn. I am an old man. I will not see the dawn. But you young people will see the dawn. And let me tell you that this country is too great to go under either the Indira Gandhi or her dictatorship. And my goodness me, I thought as we were boarding the flight to return to Bombay, that Bombay airport, my father would definitely be detained. But he was not. And this is one of those great inexplicable phenomena in the world. But we had such trying times at that time. I would get phone calls from Reuters. Can we speak to Mr. MC Chagla? I said, no, he's at the Wellington Club playing bridge. Are you sure? So I said, well, why? What have you heard? He said, no. I said, please tell me, I'm extremely concerned. And my wife and I were going out for dinner. And he said, no, we've just heard that the detention order is out. And so we cancelled dinner. We waited home. And I couldn't get through to the Wellington Club. And suddenly the doorbell rang. And there was my father. So I said, hello, what are you doing here? So he said, what are you doing? I thought both of you were going out for dinner. And I said, I thought you were in detention. There was a detention order out for you. He said, well, not yet, but I have my suitcase packed and ready. So those were the days when we lived through all of that.
Like you said, the emergency was one of the darkest periods in India, which also gets me to 1976. Jayaprakash Narayanan was guided and stated and told by a lot of you, including you, that because of the ADM Jabalpur judgment, 2 Supreme Court judges there should be a super session and they should not be the Chief Justice of India. He agreed to this. A statement was signed. However, that statement was not released. What happened at that time with Jayaprakash Narayan, the advice you gave, and what happened to that statement that you had prepared?
What happened was that Nurani and myself, A.G. Nurani and myself, we went to see JP. And we told him that, JP, look, what has happened with the ADM Jabalpur is something which there were 2 judges vying for the Chief Justiceship, for which they sacrificed the interests of the country. Something which we all now know was something which was completely could never have or should never have been done. And what we suggested that, JP, you are the conscience of the country. Why don't you issue a press statement that there should be a supersession to end all supersessions, and that neither of those 2 judges should become the Chief Justice of India. And Abraham, his secretary, he immediately stepped in and said, Jayaprakash ji, Moraji Bhai said that please don't go to the press, always first talk to me, etc., etc. So again, I said that, look, Jayaprakash ji, you are not answerable to the Prime Minister of India, to anyone else. But, so Abraham said that MC Chagla is going to come and see you tomorrow, so why don't you wait and talk to him? So I said, I don't think we have any problem about that. By all means, do discuss it with him. And the next day my father did see him, and I was with him. And so Jayaprakash asked him, and he said, these youngsters are absolutely right. Of course, this is something that you must do. And we had prepared the press statement. And so Jayaprakash signed that. And he was leaving for Patna. And so we said, can we issue this as a press statement? So all the people surrounding him, they said, no, we'll do it from Patna. And from the airport, I received a phone call that Jayaprakash has changed his mind. He does not wish to issue this press statement. So I said, may I have that document back? It is my property. And so I would like to keep it, not that I will release it to the press. To which the answer was that, no, we've been told that it should be destroyed, and therefore we have torn it down.
Mr. Chagla, there was also a time when your father was the ambassador to several countries abroad. I heard you met Fidel Castro, you met Che. Take us through that time. How were those times, and what were the remarkable moments that you remember from that period, sir?
My father was ambassador to the United States, but coincidentally he was also ambassador to Mexico and Cuba. And I was at Cambridge at the time, and my summer vacation I went to Washington. And it so happened that he was going to Cuba for the first time as the ambassador. And the newly sworn in Fidel Castro government was there. And it was a remarkable experience because there was no residence of the ambassador. He was staying at the Havana Hilton. And the cabinet, the entire cabinet was invited to a restaurant called the Floride, which happened to be Ernest Hemingway's most favorite restaurant. And well, we didn't know anybody. My father didn't know anyone. So he told the chief of protocol to be there to introduce us to all the ministers as they came in. And so we went to the Floride, and there was this music outside, and there were some diners, and we were taken into a large inner room where we were drinking daiquiris with the ministers as they came one by one, all a young lot. There was one gentleman, one minister who was grey-haired, and they called him Papa. And then we drank daiquiris, and I made the mistake of offering one of them my cigarette. I smoked Lucky Strike at the time. And he said, we don't smoke these, we burn them. So I withdrew my packet immediately. And then after a good while, there was suddenly the music outside stopped. There was a little clapping which went on. And the two most handsome men I've ever seen entered the room in green fatigues, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. And it was unbelievable to see these two persons who I had seen only in memory and knew only from memory and historical readings. And it was an amazing evening. They drank and they laughed, and the band leader came in from outside, and they hugged each other and said, we were in the hills together, the men. And we came down together for freeing Cuba from Batista. And so over dinner, Fidel Castro asked me, he said that, and what do you do, young man? So I said, I'm studying law. He said, well, at one time I studied law. Now I make the laws. So I said, that's a far more rewarding business, I'm sure, than just practicing law. And so he said, at that time I had already sported a beard, which I have now. And he said, with this beard, you should stay back in Cuba. So I said, if you promise me a place in your cabinet, I'll certainly stay. So he turned to my father and he said, this young man will go far, he will go far. But there they were. And Che Guevara, oh, what a handsome, remarkable man. Truly the stuff that legends are made of. So this was a great experience. Of course, I had many other experiences. We went to Mexico at the time of the 150th year of the liberation. In London as High Commissioner, I met so many Lord Denning and various others, law lords, and it was altogether quite an interesting experience.
Mr. Chagla, you were also a very important part of your father's autobiography, that was Roses. Take us through how Roses came about and how that period was for you all.
We'd all been telling him for a long time that you must write your autobiography. There is so much that you've done, so much that you've seen, right from your Oxford days until and all the positions that he had held, which I think is just remarkable of any individual. And it was when he had his cataract operation, and when he couldn't read, and he was fretting and fretting because for him reading was everything. Then I got a tape recorder and I said, look, why don't you start dictating? And my father had this great felicity of language, his ability to dictate, because all his judgments in 17 years, every judgment was delivered immediately after the arguments were over. He never reserved a single judgment except for the prohibition case, but that's because there was a little discussion that they had to have. But other than that, every judgment had been dictated extempore immediately after the arguments were over. So there he was, he started talking into the microphone. And my wife started typing out the spoken word. And that's how Roses in December was born.
How and what you experienced in the courts, it would be a pleasure to know, because we often hear about the skills of Mr. Palkhiwala.
Nani Palkhiwala was, as you rightly said, quote me saying, I consider to be the greatest lawyer that I've ever known. Greatest lawyer in the sense not merely of knowledge of the law, but of advocacy. And I think that's what really makes a great lawyer, that his advocacy is such. And for Nani, it was like he waved a magic wand. It robbed you momentarily of all reason and belief. And you always felt that there was no other point of view. And that, I think, is a sign of a great advocate. And that's what Nani was. And my own experience of him, which I've recounted before, and I must recount again, was in the Karimbai Ibrahim baronetcy case. That it had been repealed, and as a result, there would be a resulting trust. But the question was a number of nice legal questions that arose of trust law as to A, whether there would be a resulting trust, B, if there was a resulting trust, how it would open, who would be the beneficiaries, Hindu law, Muslim law, etc., etc. But I was brought in at the appellate stage. And so Nani, with his immense usual courtesy, asked the question, Iqbal, if we have the conference at 8 in the evening in my chambers, would that be inconvenient to you? I said, Nani, anytime you want, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I'll be there. So he said, right, we will meet. And so I went and assiduously went to the High Court library. And this was a matter more on first principles, but I try and look for whatever I could find. And I came with this armful of books. Again, I must remind you, there were no Xerox copies then. And I came to the chambers and I brought these books to Nani. And Nani looked at them and he always speed read. and he was looking through them one after another, and he read the first one, and he said, "Yes, I think this is good. Keep this."
I ask you, sir, what are you passionate about? How is the day in your life and how does it pan out? How many hours do you spend on law? How many hours do you spend with your family? Do you get time to spend do you get any time at all for your passions of literature, golf and other things, sir?
There was a time when I was in very busy practice as a young man. So even Sundays I would be holding conferences at home, much to the disappointment of my wife. And finally she extracted a promise from me that Sundays, at least Sundays, were sacred. And so I stopped having those conferences at home on Sundays. But things are much easier now. When you get on and you're 82, you don't run around like a spring chicken any longer. So I'm able to just be more discriminating in what I do. I have much more time. And now with the pandemic, there was even greater time. Of course, now things have hotted up again with virtual hearings in different courts. But yes, so I do make it a point to see that there is a division in my life between my law and literature, my golf, as you called it, and my photography. Those were my great hobbies. So that is how I try and space my life out.
That's lovely, sir. As I come to the end of the show on the Legal Eagle, I thank you for being a part of the show. I also thank you, sir, for sharing with us invaluable lessons about a time when you were heading the Bombay Bar, also about the emergency, because it's this kind of zeal and passion that keeps young law students, that keeps lawyers very, very motivated when it comes to the profession. I also thank you for taking out time and coming on the Legal Eagle with us. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time.
Thank you, Rhythm. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for having me.